Hey, everybody. Sparkle fingers
Yeah,
today.
we have some news for y'all. I know we didn't go over this, but this is the last time I'm gonna be here in the same place with mom because I'm gonna have to do the thing on my phone because I'm gonna have to be at my dad's. So I would still be here for a lot of the weeks, probably most of them or all of them that I'm there. But it would just be a little different because there's gonna be like no background and it's just gonna be me on my phone.
We're going to try. That's only for 3 weeks, right?
Yeah,
3 weeks,
three
yeah.
or four, yeah.
So,
Six or seven. I'm sorry.
oh, yeah,
I'm sorry.
kids. Anyways, we're going to try. But we'll let you know.
You'll see.
It'll be so fun. We've never tried it this way, so we're going to try.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So, today, welcome to Authentic Points of View. She was excited to tell you about our fun stuff we're going to try. But we're excited about today's guest, right? Well, no, we're doing weird, creepy smiles today. So, John Fela. And I'm excited because it's 2 weeks in a row that we've had a man on. Woohoo! Weird thing to be excited about, but it's so exciting. All right. So, John Fela is Ministry Relations Manager at Joni and Friends Chicago, disability parent and advocate, writer, speaker, and support group leader. Yay! So, welcome to the show, John.
Well, thank you very much, and I will try to live up to that expectation of being the second guy in a row. So,
So, the first guy, right, was Shane, was the first one, wasn't he? So, Shane is my buddy. I don't know if you know him because he leads, he is one of the, I don't know what he is, but anyway, if he's like the president or vice president, but he runs the men's ADHD group. But since your kid is in it, you might not know. But and also he runs autism and ADHD parenting group. So I didn't know if you knew him. His name is Shane Frapp. He's amazing. He was our first guy on. Last minute. Our person canceled. I've interviewed him like 4 times throughout the years of me having podcasts. And so the night before, I was like, "Hey, bud, you want to come on?" And he's like, "Yeah." So he's my ringer or whatever. But and then last week we had on an awesome man on Father's Day, so that was really cool too. So we're excited to. It's just how it happened. It's not that we don't have men on. It's just everybody scheduled themselves this time. So it's like however, it kind of fell is that's just how it's going. But not that we're against speaking to men. I don't want you to think that.
not at
So
all.
anyway, so I'm excited to talk to you. Um, don't yawn. She's yawning.
I'm sorry. Today has been a long day.
She's so fun.
A little backstory, real quick.
Oh my goodness.
My aunt, her sister, and my cousin are here, and he's 4, and he's really hyper. So
Hey, don't say that.
No, I love him. He ain't hyper. I'm hyper.
Anyway, he has a lot of energy. He does. So anyway, but he's so fun. It's so cool to get to hang out with him. Anyway, McKenna, how you doing? Okay, sorry. Back to you. I feel like we're going like on the news.
No
thing.
problem.
Back to you in the studio. So your son is 17 now. Is that right?
Yeah, my son Chris is 17. He's autistic nonverbal. Currently, he's actually living. So I'm in the Chicago area, but he's living at a residential facility and therapeutic school in Wichita, Kansas, called Heartspring.
Wow.
And it's just a temporary thing. He's finishing up high school. He had a pretty good experience in his public high school in the special ed program in the town that he grew up in around here. But unfortunately, he had a really rough sophomore year of high school. There were a lot of factors. And his mom and I'm divorced from his mom, but we just kind of made the decision that we needed to transition him somewhere else. It's been a great experience so far. He went almost a year ago, a little over a year ago, and he'll ideally be back in a year. But it's been a great thing. He's gotten excellent care, and they've been very supportive of him and us. So,
oh, I love that. That's so awesome. So, Was that a hard decision to make? Because I'm not good at geography, but how far is Kansas from Chicago? It's pretty far, right? Because that's like Midwest, and they're both
Yeah,
Midwest, I think.
it's at least, if you did it in the car, it's probably, if you went straight, at least it's about a 10-hour drive. So
Oh wow.
when we brought him out there, we drove him out. But when so I'm remarried now, so stepmom and myself will go visit him, and we'll fly out and we'll hang out for a few days and then fly back. It's just easier. You could drive it if you wanted, but that just works for us. So it's definitely not close. But the reality is, and I think this is something, unfortunately, that a lot of families like ours face, is that when we realized that his public school, which we never had an issue with really in the past, wasn't going to be a fit, then we had to look at choices in our area. Now, to be fair, there are a lot of good choices very similar to where he is now in the Chicago area, but there are some that are not as good, right? And the goal, of course, was, as someone had told us, you want to send him to something, not just send him away from something, right? So it's
Right.
not just let's put him anywhere, let's put him in the best place. And unfortunately, one of the things that contributed to this was that he started showing signs of aggression, which he was not his personality. That was not ever something that came up for him. These things just started to manifest, and again, for a few reasons, we think. But because of that, some places said no, and some places said yes. But the places that said yes, we were just not really interested in. So we started to look at out-of-state options, and this place came up. And not only did they say pretty much yes to us all the way, but we also found out later, as is also the case with families like ours, when you talk to people, you find out, oh, that place is great. We heard that from other parents. We heard it from some of his therapists, that it was just nationally known. People go to train there, and just all this cool stuff. So we said, okay, that sounds like a match. So not our first choice. I mean, obviously our first choice was that he could have just been where he was.
Yeah.
But then when that wasn't a choice, we had to look at, okay, what was a good placement outside of the state, kind of a thing. And it is interesting that the state that sends this place the most families is actually Illinois, which tells you something about Illinois. So, but again, it just was what worked for us in the moment. And again, we are definitely excited, for him to come back, and we have some different options lined up for him when he gets back too. So.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I'm glad that I know it's hard, but I'm so glad that you found a good fit for him, because that's also, very difficult, I'm sure. Do you have a question? Because I have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you know how he's liking it there?
So, as far as we can tell, he's liking it. Of course, when I said he's got autism, he's also nonverbal.
Right.
So, in terms of his understanding, we always talk to him, and we've always said that he gets everything. He just can't really express it. As far as we can see, he really hasn't had a lot of behavior stuff. He really hasn't had any aggression. He's had a few bad days here and there, but for the most part, again, it's been at least a year. He's done great, kind of a thing. So I think he's enjoying it. He's definitely always excited when we come to visit, for sure. We always assume maybe he's thinking like, oh, he's just going to pack up and leave and not come back or go home or something. But, we have to talk him through that. But he loves spending the time with us. But again, it's never like he's upset or frustrated to go back. I think he just kind of knows that's his home for now. So.
Yeah. Well, that's really good though. I mean, it's got to be hard for him not being able to communicate the way he might want to. How does he communicate? Does he have like a board, or like does he just write things out, or like what does he do to communicate?
Yeah, we have tried a variety of techniques over the years. Right now, his main mode of communication is Touch Chat, which is a communication app. It's on his iPad. So, it's just a lot of, again, like queuing, picture exchange kind of stuff. There's categories of things. So, if there's a particular thing he wants to eat for dinner, he can click on his food tab and, give us the different choices and things. There's also a letterboard on there, because you mentioned that, we have tried some different versions of communication with the letter board, some of the RPM stuff, as most of our listeners are probably familiar. We tried a little bit of that. It worked to a degree, but not in every environment and not with every person. So I can tell you that he can respond to some questions by typing out some answers. It's just not consistent. And, really just same thing with the touch chat in general. So a lot of it, at least for, mom, dad, stepmom, for the ones that know him best, a lot of it really comes down to, just knowing his cues, his body language, just kind of seeing like what his mood is. He's got some very basic language. Sometimes you ask him a question, he'll tell you, yeah, or shake his head kind of a thing. So that does help. And he's got a few basic signs in there too. So I would tell you, we threw a lot of stuff at him, as most parents in our situation do, and some things stick and some didn't. But between all of it, we can usually kind of figure out where he's at. So,
yeah, wow. So, go ahead.
So this might seem like a weird question, but I don't know a lot about being nonverbal. So this is embarrassing. Has he been nonverbal his own life?
Yes, and actually, that was.
It's not a dumb question. She said it's a dumb question, but it's not. It's not a dumb question.
Right, and I wasn't saying yes to it being a dumb question. I was just saying yes to,
No,
yeah.
I didn't think you were.
Speaking to what that's like. So yeah, you know what? When him being nonverbal was the first thing that alerted us to the fact that there might be something there disability wise. I remember, and I love telling this story all the time. When he was 18 months, we went for his checkup, and that's usually the checkup where they go through like a battery of questions, and they're looking at these different milestones. And if there is an issue, that's usually where they can determine it. And I remember his pediatrician at the time asking us the question, is he speaking? Is he talking at all? And we said, well, sort of. There's a little babbling, but there's not really a lot in terms of like echolalia. There isn't a lot of just, him kind of, with the repetitive consonants or what vowels or whatever, he's not giving us what we would expect from a child his age. Now, again, it was our first child. My ex-wife and I, his mom, we were actually both teachers at the time. So, but we were elementary and middle school teachers. We didn't really have a lot of experience with very young children. So the pediatrician famously said, well, what you want to do is you want to take him across the street to the professional building they have and let him see the speech therapist. And I don't know what they do, but they play with the kids and they make them talk. So just take him over there and they'll figure it out and he'll be just fine. And of course we said, okay, well, I guess that's what we're going to do. And we take him to the speech therapist, and the speech therapist worked with him a little bit and said, well, we think there could be something else here. Had his hearing tested, hearing was fine. So then we knew that there could be something. And then it was about when he was just right before he turned 3, probably a few months before he turned 3, that we took him to a neuropsychologist. And then we got the diagnosis at the time of what was called pervasive developmental disorder, PDD. That no longer exists. Now it's just blanket autism. So it's really all autism. There are some things, as you're probably aware too, that like your Asperger's kind of thing, that's under the autism umbrella, basically. So it really falls into that category. But essentially, we had that autism diagnosis for the most part at that point. And then we just started making plans from there in terms of, a whole variety of therapies. So speech was obviously involved in that, but PT, OT, ABA, you name it, we probably tried it.
So I'm going to ask you a question. You just kind of answered it though, just for my own curiosity about my granddaughter. So my son was diagnosed with, they don't call it, like you said, Asperger's, they don't call it that anymore. When ADHD, he got diagnosed at 4, and I think Asperger's maybe like 5 or 6. And so he went to occupational therapy and all this stuff, and everybody would ask him which parent has ADHD or autism, and I would go, I don't know, I don't think it's me. And it was me, probably. I haven't been diagnosed, but I have taken a lot of the tests and things, and I'm like, oh, okay. But but I didn't present like my son. Autism presents anyway, but with ADHD, I did not present like him because he is very, very, very hyperactive, and I wasn't. But with my granddaughter, just turned 1 in April. And my son said, I think she has autism. And I said, that's okay if she does. It's okay. But my question is, he was not nonverbal, but she, I don't want to diagnose, I don't diagnose. I'm a nurse, but she makes noises like, ah, like she'll make sounds. She says a couple of words, but not a lot. But she does make sounds, but like she doesn't repeat a lot. Like, say for instance, even my son did, or any other kids do. So, but she does a lot of stimming, like rubbing and different things. And my son's is rocking back and forth. Even he's 22 now, and he still rocks back and forth. So, like you said, you already kind of mentioned it, but she can say like mama some, but she doesn't. She said hey a lot. She'll scream like hey, hey. But other words that you get her to repeat, she doesn't really do it. Is that how your son was, or was he not really saying too much of anything when he was little?
Great question. So yeah, as I kind of shared, we really weren't getting anything. It really was a lot of high pitched sounds,
Okay.
like almost like a lot of like singing type of a thing. But again, there's no syllabalization with it. It's just kind of an up and down, type of a deal with the volume. Now again, does he have some basic words? As I said, yeah, sometimes he can say,
Right.
yeah, sometimes like when he sees me, he'll say like da 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 da. So we did at least get up to that point. But one quick thing that I'll mention, and I love telling this story too, and I think this really highlights the fact that we have to remember that for our nonverbal kids, and we've always said this about our son, that based on everyone that's worked with him and the observations and everything, that he's aware of everything. He has the receptive language, he just can't communicate. But when he was about five or six, so the organization I work for, it's actually Johnny and Friends. I know most people say Joni, but it's actually Johnny.
Oh, sorry.
But yeah, no, that's all right. So Johnny and Friends is a global Christian disability ministry organization. So we do outreach with families in the States and around the world. But in the States, one of our biggest outreaches is something called Family Retreat, which is basically it's a camp for families that have disability in them. The child can be any age or any condition, but unlike some other organizations where they may have a camp for disabled youth or adults, at this one the whole family gets to go, regardless of how many family you got, or mom and dad, or grandma, grandpa, whatever it is. Right. So we started going actually before I started working for them years ago. I'm going back about 15 years now. And the first year we were there, now again, one of the things about my son at that age too was that he was constantly in motion. He was always moving. He never stopped moving. And he would stim. A lot of it was really, sensory seeking stuff, but if he could run, just like nonstop for hours, he'd be fine doing that. And so what happens is when you come to the camp, the person with the disability gets paired with a one-on-one buddy for the week, right? And that person takes them to all of the programming and the activities. They accompany your family. They help you at meals, whatever it is. So the woman, who was lovely, but she was a middle-aged woman. She had just had some knee surgery. She wasn't someone who was going to be exceptionally like quick on her feet, like maybe an 18-year-old with, no knee issues, let's say, for example. So I think she felt a little concerned that I don't know if I can do a good job for this family because I can't keep up with them. So the families always arrive on a Monday and leave on Friday. So on Tuesday, which was our first full day there, his mom and I, we were at our parents' programming thing, and she was with him, and they were taking a break in one of the common areas, and they were talking to another volunteer, and the two of them were going back and forth, and this woman was expressing about how she wanted to do a good job for us, but she was really hoping that she could kind of keep up. And again, it's a Christian camp, so she's saying, I'd love for you to pray for me on that. And the volunteer said, yes, I'll absolutely be praying that you can keep up, and your health is good and everything. And then all of a sudden, Chris, who was listening to this whole conversation, turns around, looks at them, and says, "Amen, God." And they look at him like, did he just say that? And if it's one of those things where if you weren't there, you wouldn't have believed it. Like, we had a hard time believing it. But that was the amazing thing about it, was that as much as he was stimming and off doing his own thing,
Yeah.
he was still hearing the conversation. He was understanding the conversation, and then he responded appropriately. Oh, I think I'm supposed to say this. So go figure.
Oh, that's so awesome. That's so cool. So, yeah, I am far away from them, so they're in Maryland and I'm here. So in Georgia. So I just wish I could like help more and be a support, like, like so if they're because they're young parents and so was I a young parent. So going to all the appointments and trying to figure out everything and all that and like I just wish I was there to support them, but I know they're gonna do a good job regardless. But that's a really awesome. Where is Johnny and Friends only in Chicago or
No, we're a global organization. We're in about 30 countries around the world.
wow.
Our home offices are in Southern California, and that's where Johnny, our founder, lives. Johnny is an adult quadriplegic, and she's in her 70s now. She became a quadriplegic at 17, so this is basically her life mission. But we have offices around the country. I want to say we probably have about 15-ish regional offices. So like our Chicago office, for example, covers several states in the Midwest, but then we have offices around the country. They may not specifically be in your state or your town, but everywhere in the country is covered by somebody. So if you literally just go to our website, johnnyandfriends.org, and then you just punch your zip code in, you would find the office closest to you and then find out about their outreach. So for example, all of the offices do a family retreat, as I just described. We do ours up in Michigan for the Chicago office, but again, every office does them and they do them in different places. So, sometimes you can find one that's closer to you, or you can find out about other outreach that the organization does. That's, probably the thing we're best known for, but there are a lot of other things we do. And again, it's a wonderful organization because, like I always tell friends, because again, I work just as much in the secular disability world with my advocacy as I do in the faith-based world. And the reality is that for, even families that might not attend a church or might not even be Christian, I say, you know what, this is such an incredible experience because in this environment, your family is loved, your family's respected. There is no issue if your child is having a bad day. They can scream as loud as they want in the dining hall during breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It's okay. And there's no judgment. There's no weird looks. There's nothing. There's a lot of how can we help you?
Yeah.
But you are not treated the way that most of our families are treated, unfortunately, in the world. And that is one thing we can agree on, that families of disability, unfortunately, if folks do not have a direct experience or an understanding of it, so often the judgment eyes come out, and we've all had that, at the grocery store, the movies,
Yeah.
or wherever you're at the park, and what's wrong with that kid or what's wrong with those parents, and not really understanding what's behind that.
Yeah. I know it was not to compare my son to your son at all, but even for my son, he has an older brother. And so I had them at 18 and 20. And my older son would get to go spend the night at friends' houses and stuff like that. But my son was too much for everybody to handle. So unfortunately, he didn't have that experience as much. And sometimes I remember like his 10th birthday, he is 10 years and 9 days older than her. So for his 10th birthday party, he, and he told it like it is. Like he didn't filter his words, of course. So he was like, don't have the baby today. This is my first sleepover and I want to have a good time. You cannot have the baby and ruin my sleepover. And I was like, okay, buddy. So he had his first sleepover, like kids came to our house and stuff like that. And he had the best time and it was awesome. But I always understood, but it still was like hurtful as a parent. So I understand like the judgment and everything, and again, not comparing it on the same level, but and also I was a very young parent, so I got judgment for that as well. People looked at me like, even when he was in school, both of them, especially my older one, and most of his friends' parents were 40 years old or 30 older 30s, and I was 20s. So it's just different. But I know it's hard on relationships. So how was it raising? I you're like, I have a question, don't you? Give me a cold. Remember, you can remember your question. How was it in your first marriage? Getting a diagnosis and trying to raise your son. How did that play out?
Yeah. So I remember in the early days when my son was born. He was actually born 5 weeks early. We brought
Oh
him home from
wow.
the hospital, and he was 4 pounds 2 ounces when he was born.
Oh,
He was a little bit less when we brought him home. Of course, now I'm married to a wonderful woman who is a NICU nurse, so
Oh,
neonatal intensive care nurse. So of course she deals with stuff that's even way beyond that. But for a new parent, it's still a lot. So I would tell you that, in the early days, it was extremely hard because he was, the best way we could describe it at the time was a colicky baby, meaning he was always crying. He was always kind of unsettled. It took a lot to get him settled. But he actually turned out to be a pretty happy baby. He was actually, he had a sweet disposition. He loved being around people. He didn't shy away from that. He actually was drawn to people, even at a very young age. And he always kind of had this excitement level for life. And again, once he started walking, he was just kind of taking off. But the thing that I like to share, and again, coming from a dad's perspective, and this is something that I'd like to share, not, I mean, certainly for the parents, for the married parents and couples out there, but also specifically for the dads. One of the biggest things that I struggled with was when my son got his formal diagnosis, and when we started to see, and even before that, when we started to make a plan about, okay, it looks like we need to go some kind of a therapy route. We need to be investigating these things. We need to see what insurance is covering and not, et cetera. What happened in our marriage was that my son's mom, my ex-wife, who is an excellent mom and always has been, but very type A, has to be in control,
right.
and also an educator, so has that teacher brain about being organized. So she was great with contacting the doctors, the insurance, the therapist, making the appointments, managing all of that. And so in a lot of ways it was, okay, I'm not going to step into that because that's kind of your world. But the problem is that, and we see this with a lot of marriages, and it's also one of the reasons why the divorce rate is so high with families with disability. I think, again, my opinion, because a lot of times each individual kind of loses themselves within the relationship, mainly because the
Right.
child with a disability requires so much care. And so then both the mom and the dad are kind of on an island now. So this is my job and this is your job. Well, most men, not all, but most, will logically say, I'm going to throw myself into my work. I'm going to work very hard. I'm going to make a lot of money. So then we have money to spend on all of these treatments and things. Now, that sounds great, but here's the problem. For most men that do that, then you also see that many times they become emotionally checked out of the family, of the marriage, and maybe in some ways also resent the fact that the child has a disability. Again, I'm not talking about all dads, because I know a lot of incredible ones. But the fact is that there is grief and there is shame, and all of those things get played out. And when the mom and the dad are not engaging in discussing those things and really helping to kind of sort those feelings out, then it really becomes a finger pointing of, you did this or you didn't do enough or you're not doing enough kind of a thing. And in my case, for example, I was never the breadwinner in our family. I never made more money than my wife. We were both educators. She always made more. It was just kind of the way it played out. So if I didn't make the money and I didn't schedule all of the stuff and manage all of the things, then what did I do? Right? What was my value? What was my purpose? Sure, I'm dad, but the world has a different opinion of those things. You might be dad, but she seems like she's doing everything and seems like you're doing nothing. So what's going on? And I felt a lot of guilt and shame there. And really to the point where we went through a season of life when right about the time he was maybe 4 or 5, when we almost divorced. We wound up getting divorced eventually years later, but we were at a very dark place, and just nothing was working. And so for me, I realized a couple of things, and I usually speak about this in my, not just in my interviews, but when I do presentations and things. I speak about how I really understood that I had no community, right? I had no one who understood me. I had family, I had friends, but they didn't get me. They had no idea about how to relate to what I was going through. They couldn't relate to my situation with my son or my wife. And they really didn't have advice for me because they really didn't know what advice to give. So what I did, and my role again intentionally, was to find and build real community. Now, some of that was being around other men, not necessarily special needs dads. This is right about the time that our family and I actually made a commitment to actually attend church on a regular basis. Part of the reason was because we were seeking that intentional community, but that was also actually where I found my Christian faith. I wasn't raised Christian, and that was something that, eventually, as I was seeking for community, that basically came into my space. But building intentional community, meaning having friends that understand your experience as a special needs dad, having parents that you can lean into for questions, resources, support. We were very intentional about that. And I became even more intentional because I saw, in terms of, kind of the relationships that I was making and the things I started to do, my value might actually be to be the guy who goes out and finds different things, or finds different resources, or makes relationships with people and uses the networking skills, and tries to kind of have this pool of stuff so that if we have a question about something, I can then go to someone that I know, right? And again, that took many years. That was not an overnight thing. It started in very, small ways, locally, but then, of course, for me at least, it became something that I started doing on a bigger national level. And so now, when I have questions about something regarding my son, whether it's a placement at a school or residential or, therapy or whatever it is, I have all of those folks I can lean into. Whereas when I first started out on this journey, I had nothing and I felt like nothing. But then I had to really understand what my true value was. It wasn't in my checkbook, and it wasn't in the fact even that I could manage all of those things, which I might have been able to do. Although, again, my son's mom did a great job. My value was in leaning into the gifts and talents I had, and then developing relationships with people that I found not only could I get help from, but then also too, I could be a support to as well when they needed me also.
That's wonderful. And thank you for saying stuff from dad's or man's perspective, because I love that. And I think it's very important. We all play important roles in any relationship that we are in. And it's important to know that, I'll just say, I'm sure lots of women get mad at me for saying this, but I've met a lot of women that don't think that everybody's equal per se. And that's not true. Everybody has like you said, an important role, and we're equal. Now, I am a single mom, so I do everything, and now she's going to her dad's for a few weeks. So that's a different story. But if we have two parents in the house, and plus dads are important too. I'm not saying that her dad is not important, but what I'm saying is my role is a little different. But when you're married and everything, like, everybody has their set roles, but we're all as important as the other one. That's how I feel about it. But do you have a question? You forgot it? Oh, you'll remember. Beep, boop. Do you remember now? Oh, she said her head hurts. I'm sorry. Did I make you hurt going like this?
That's what happens when I talk too much. That's
no.
Bright light.
Oh yeah, I get dizzy a lot. I have POTS. So speaking of not having a man in the house, this is so sad. I'm going to embarrass myself. I'm so authentic. That's why my show is called Authentic Points of View. This light bulb has been out for...
It's because of the type of light.
I think my ex moved out in September. We were together 6.5 years. He would have easily changed that light bulb in 35 seconds. It's been out for months, and I have never changed the light bulb. So we use my really bright, photography light bulb.
We used it when it wasn't
out.
Oh.
Okay. But yes, so that's another reason. It does go beam in it's very bright. But anyway, it's okay. Do you want to quit? No? You want to leave? Then think of a question. Be nice. Okay. All right. Anyway. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you forgot it. Okay, let's ask him something. Ready?
I'm thinking.
You're thinking? Okay. Sorry, John, poor John.
Okay. Take
So,
your time.
are you still a teacher?
No, so I currently work for Johnny and Friends full
Oh,
time, but
yeah.
that's my day job. I was a teacher for almost 20 years, and I did a little bit of everything: elementary, preschool. I was a preschool director, in fact, for a time, and
Oh,
I also did special ed. So I know it from a few different viewpoints, kind of a thing. But my position that I currently do opened up a few years ago, and it just made all the sense in the world, because really a lot of what I do now is really leans into and is supported by the advocacy work I've already been doing for many years. So it's just a nice logical fit. So I often say I'm all disability all the time. It's my day job. It's my not day job. It's just what I do for fun, I guess. So
Oh, that's beautiful. It takes a special person to to I don't know how to word it, but to have the patience maybe, um, because I remember, again, it was just me with two kids when he was little, and he never slept. He still doesn't sleep. I actually don't sleep very well either, but he never slept. And I would just like sometimes just want to take a breather on the porch, just walk on the porch to get like 5 seconds and to just take a breather. And like one night he broke his foot because he was supposed to be sleeping, but him and his brother were playing with a chair and it landed on his foot and stuff like that. And so like I can imagine, um, I love kids, and so it would be fun to do that. But having a lot of different personalities and kids, that's got to be hard work, but it's definitely rewarding, I'm sure.
yeah, and I absolutely love teaching for many many years. I will say I love the profession of teaching. I love the art of teaching. I love working with kids. And unfortunately, if you really ask me what I think, I'll tell you that teaching has always been a hard job, but I think it's exponentially hard now, because there are so many expectations, and there's so much data recording and data mining, I would argue, even in terms of trying to get as much information as you can about how to teach a particular student or class of students. And it just puts so much pressure on the educator. It's something that for me, unfortunately, just stopped being fun, or something that I really enjoyed doing the way that I did when I started. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And I know a lot of teachers who have actually left teaching, but still stayed in the world, again, because if, let's say, they had a special ed background, they either, many of them went into like IEP advocacy, right? So, they know the special ed world. They know it from, being in the classroom and also in the meeting rooms. And some of them even study IEP law, in fact. And so they kind of just start their own business. And that's great, because we all love, I still love working with kids, and I still love obviously working with disability, whether it's in a special ed classroom or, kind of what I do now. But I'm absolutely glad that I transitioned out when I did. I often say, if I ever stop doing the job I'm doing now with Johnny and Friends, I'd always be doing disability stuff. I would probably go back to teaching, although I'd be really, really reluctant to. But that's why I say, like, I love where I am now. I love what I do. I have the utmost respect for teachers, for sure, having been there, done that. But I think I was just kind of spent in terms of just being in that environment every day.
I understand completely. Do you have a question now? Do you know what an IEP is? Your brother had one.
isn't it like when there's like a special teacher that helps you with schoolwork and everything?
Do you know what it stands for?
Mhm.
Okay, why don't you ask what does IEP stand for?
Okay. What does IEP stand for?
IEP stands for, let's see, the I is I, no, it's individualized education plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
That's good.
Yeah, it is good, but I'm just gonna say this from the parenting, and I'm not trying to be like. I think that's great that there's advocates for it. I had a really hard time getting my son IEP. They fought me on it. and my case manager came. Well, his case manager wasn't my case manager. His case manager came, and it was like a really hard thing. They actually made him lose his IEP once because he got held back, but they never told me. They never included me in the process and said like if he gets held back, he'll lose this. They just literally like he started the next grade. Well, it was the same grade, but he started again, and then all of a sudden he didn't have the help and the tools that he needed. And I said, well, what happened? And they're like, well, he got held back. And I'm like, okay, but nobody told me that that was the stipulation or whatever or the rules. I didn't know what the rules were. Nobody like, helped us with that. It was like basically the IEP so expensive that they didn't want to do it. But to me, it shouldn't be about money. It should be about getting the child what they need. And so that was in the north. We lived in Ohio. But like that was very frustrating because it was like, what am I supposed to, like what am I supposed to do? I tried. I did a lot of great things like at home. He had a hard time reading. And so occupational therapy was fantastic. And we went to a place called Easter Seals, which is amazing. I love them. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
I love them.
Yeah.
And so we went there for a long time. He was in this like astronaut program. But they helped him learn how to read better. And there was like this cross brain thing that he did all these really cool exercises and stuff to help. And then poor guy, then it was time to learn cursive. And then we started over. And then he really struggled with that. But it was really hard to get the help that I needed. Now, that was a long time ago. He's 22. But I understand the frustration. So the advocates, like, that's really cool that people go into that because there are a lot of families that don't understand or don't know their rights or don't know how to get the help. Do you find that have you seen that as the case from the teacher side when you were a teacher, or
as far as
like that is being difficult, or is it easier to get a IEP?
Well, here's what I like to say about that. So and again, every parent should know that an IEP at the end of the day, that's a legal document, right? Right. And you should never agree to anything being in that IEP that you don't agree with or you don't like. But at the same time, if it's in there, school has a legal right to, they are obligated to provide that. So, for example, when I was teaching in the city of Chicago, and I was in some schools, let's say on the south or west side, where, the families, a very low, socioeconomic status, in terms of those demographics where they're just really not educated on these things, unfortunately. So, the child might have an IEP, or kind of the partner to that is the 504 plan, which is related to an IEP but not the same thing. But they would have these, and the school may not be providing whatever was in there. Now, the school may have a good reason, because the school is saying, well, we don't have an extra teacher, we don't have an extra support person to be a one-on-one, or we can't provide X amount of minutes. Well, okay, you're saying that, but at the end of the day, you're still supposed to have provided those things or find a way to provide them, even if that means bringing in somebody from the outside of the school, or having the child push him into either another classroom or another school entirely, depending on the resources you have available. So, and unfortunately, these parents, and, coming from this part of the world, they don't really know their rights, and they don't really know how to press the school. Whereas where my son grew up, which is a more affluent suburb of Chicago, parents are very demanding, right? And to the point where parents can be even a little bit difficult. Now, that's great when you're defending your child. From the other side of it, though, as a teacher, and this is why I really, press upon this word of empathy when I'm speaking about this process with either parents or teachers, because you have to understand from a parent standpoint, it's hard enough that your child has a disability, right? You want to make sure that they're getting everything they can to help them be successful, to support them, right? And if the school has agreed upon something and for some reason it doesn't happen, it's understandable that the parents might be upset. At the same time, those parents have to also understand that teachers, again, as I mentioned, work extremely hard.
Right.
Not every teacher is as good as another and all of that type of thing, but the fact is that teachers still work very hard. They do their best sometimes with limited resources. You have to have some compassion and empathy for that. And it's actually interesting. And I've got a couple of stories with that. I won't take a deep dive into them now. One thing I'll mention is that if somebody is kind of interested in my perspective on this, I actually just contributed a chapter to a friend's book that'll be coming out. Actually, a friend from Georgia as well, who is doing a book with Temple Grandin, and it's actually on this topic of the experiences of either former educators or current educators, or even individuals with disabilities and their perspective on the education process and all of these things. And so it's really meant as kind of a guide for future or even current educators or therapists in terms of those family dynamics and dealing with parents. And so I'm always emphasizing the word compassion and empathy. I'm emphasizing those words because when we come to the IEP table, and this was always the case for my son, we came prepared. We usually brought in some of his private therapists as well to kind of back up the things that we were seeing or what we were hoping to work on. But we were always respectful. We always told them how much we appreciated them. We'd always do little things like, bring them some coffee or donuts, or here's a little something for the class or whatever. You want to make sure they're on your side, right? It's not going to help your child's situation, if you're just pounding your fist on the table, right? We have to talk these things out. And sometimes an advocate is a necessary thing. And that's something that I would absolutely suggest that someone get if there are issues in your district. And the last thing I'll say too is, unfortunately, a lot of families just make assumptions, right? They make assumptions about a particular school or a particular district, or sometimes families, and I have had the experience of working in both public and private schools. Sometimes families think that, well, if I send my son or my child to a private school, it's going to be a better experience because I'm paying out of pocket, and so it's going to be that much better. Not necessarily, especially when we're talking about disability. When we're talking about disability, you need to understand where your child is served best. That is not always in a private school. In fact, I will tell you, if your child legitimately has a disability of any kind, especially a developmental disability, you probably want to be looking at a good public school where they're going to have those services. Those things are just going to be a given. And again, not all schools and not all districts are funded or resourced the same. That's where you want to do your research and find the best one you can, which is exactly what my son's mom and I did years ago, to make sure that those things are just there and we don't necessarily need to be fighting over them. Right. We can fight over little things, but we don't have to fight over the general level of care and support and legitimate instruction and education he's going to get.
Yeah. So I just want to say I don't ever fight with teachers. I wasn't fighting. I just felt like that I wasn't supported and that they weren't listening. But then I have another. So in Georgia, though, I felt like they were giving my son, like the IEP was like giving him a pass to like act up. So he was about to get suspended. And the rule is if you have an IEP, you have to have a meeting. And so they would say, well, is it the diagnosis fault or is it his fault? And I went, well, it's his fault. So I never went against any of the teachers or anything. I just felt like I wish they would have informed me, like, and told me, because I don't know the rules, like, I just wish there was more communication. But I love, like, she wore her shirt yesterday. She's an ambassador at her school. She's a leader at her school. It was her first year in middle school. I love them. Like, I am known at their school for a good reason. My son school for a different reason for being his mom and he was in trouble, but her reason is different. And I love them. My brother committed suicide, so she was part of the they did the suicide awareness thing. So I bought all these like buttons and different things and donated them to the school so they could pass them out and stuff like that. So I absolutely love educators, the principals, everything, the counselors. They're all amazing. They do a hard job. They have to pay for their own stuff a lot. People don't understand. Lots of teachers have to pay for their own supplies and their own special things they do with the kids, and it's not fair. And so it is very important to treat everybody with respect, regardless of what you're, doing or what school or whatever. And know that yes, it is a hard job. I'm a nurse, but I always tell them, I'm like, I don't know how you do it. It's especially middle school to me has been it's a lot of hormones. The kids are just they're well behaved. I volunteer at the school sometimes, and even at lunch duty, I was like, oh, and it was only like 3 hours. I did a few lunches, and I was like, okay, this is a lot, but it's great, but it's just a lot. So I appreciate it. But she has a question. Speak up. It's okay.
If you could go back and tell your 13-year-old self something, what would you say?
Can you hear me?
So if I went back and could tell my 13-year-old son something, or my 13-year-old self?
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
she's
okay.
not picking up. I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Well, I'll say this. So I'll just tell you a quick story about my father. Okay. My father was not a very involved dad. Okay. And he worked, he was home every night, but he drank a lot. He was essentially a functional alcoholic. He was really kind of checked out of his life, mom fought a lot and all that kind of stuff. So I always kind of resented him because I felt like, he never really gave me any advice. He never really was hands-on with me, kind of a thing. But he had this tagline. He had this thing he would always say. And it was 2 words: don't panic. And so his big life advice to me all the time was, whatever's going on, you're stressed out, you're emotional, whatever's happening, no matter what you do, stay calm, take a breath, don't panic. And I remember thinking to myself, man, all this guy ever told me was don't panic. He never did anything else, right? And like, what am I supposed to do with this? What I didn't realize, though, was how profound of a lesson that was for me, because that advice has actually carried me through a lot of very, very serious stuff in life. And I'll just tell one brief story. And this is, for any of our Christian listeners, this, might resonate a little bit more. But, after my ex-wife and I kind of went through our first season where we almost divorced, but we didn't. It's about 15 years ago. I went to go see a guy speaking at a local church. He had written a book on basically what it means to be a good man and father, kind of a thing. He was from Texas. He came on the weekend to speak, and someone had told me about it. So he's up there and he's kind of going on and he's doing his shtick and, real kind of a, gruff kind of a Texas football coach kind of a guy, and he's talking about in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus is doing the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is basically teaching us how to not be anxious, right? And don't worry about your life. And look at the birds of the air and the flower of the field. They're taken care of. You'll be taken care of too. And he goes on and on with this. And all of a sudden he stops and he looks directly at the whole group. And he says, now, guys, what is he really telling us here? I'll tell you what, 2 words: don't panic. Aww. And I sat there and I'm like, man, you got to be kidding me, right? I mean, this can't be real. But here's the thing. I drove home that night and I legitimately forgave my father because I didn't understand. Now, he may not have been aware of exactly what he was telling me, but the fact is I still got exactly the advice in life I need. I got the most important thing. No matter what's happening, don't panic. It will work out. Get calm, get your head, make a plan, say a prayer, whatever you have to do, but don't panic, right? It sounds like very simple throwaway advice, but it actually turned out to be much more profound and deep. And so that is really something. And in fact, I'm excited to say my book that I've been working on for years is finally, hopefully, going to come out this year. I just landed a publisher, so hopefully it won't be too much longer. but the working title is Faith Like My Father, and it actually speaks a lot to my relationship with him, what I saw, what I got from him, or maybe what I didn't get from him, but then also that advice and how that advice has played out through my life. So yeah, I would probably sit down with my 13-year-old and just have a long talk about that and what that really means. And your old man is not as crazy as maybe you think, so we'll give him a little credit for something. So
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. When you said that, I got chills like everywhere on my body. When you said that they said don't panic, I was like, oh, but that's really awesome. And it's great advice, actually. The age that she's at, and I remember being that age, but that's the first thing I think. Don't look at me like that, little girl. But I think that's the first thing that they do at that age is you just panic. You're like, I can't go to the dance. Wah! This didn't happen. And that's just, I mean, you're a male, so maybe not for males, but like as a female, sometimes that's what happened. It's like you don't process the whole thing even first. You don't think about, okay, let's come up with a different solution or outcome or whatever, or different plan. And it's just like, wah! And then it's kind of like, you get like that first, and then you go, okay, well then what now? But it's great to just process, think, don't panic. It's going to be okay, right? It's going to be okay. So that's really awesome. Where can we find you other than you talked about your book? So that's really cool. Hopefully it does come out this year. What is the one called with your friends in Georgia? Do you know the name of it?
I don't recall the working title yet, but it's Dr. Stephanie Holmes is her name. She's actually written some really cool stuff already on neurodiversity within families and even between married couples as well, where there's neurodiversity. So she's doing some remarkable work. So you could look her up, and I don't recall the working title of the book offhand. But if you do a search on her, or me, because I'm sure I will be blasting it out as well when it gets out there. So hopefully that's going to be out this year as well. But I'm, I see that you just put up Johnny and Friends. Yeah, you can look up johnnyandfriends.org and find the office in your area for a lot of the different things we do. And then for myself, I do a ton of advocacy work and things. So I do have a ton of blogs, podcasts, presentations. The easiest way to find me is probably my website, which is just johnfela.com, just my name.com. You can punch me into the Google machine, as I like to joke, and you'll find a whole bunch of stuff in there. Really quick caveat, I also do like to let everyone know that if you punch me into the Google machine, sometimes you may find things with a slightly different last name, because I actually used to have a slightly different last name, which was Fela Geller, with a Geller at the end. The reason for that is because in my previous marriage, my ex-wife and I took our two last names and put them together. So if you see Fela Geller, I'm the same guy. Just know that I went back to the original name when I got remarried. So I just like to clear that up. But otherwise, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the social media. Please reach out. Please feel free to send me a message or a question or anything, and happy to respond.
Thank you so much for what you do. I love that you are an advocate for people and families with disabilities. I just think it's so important. I had an amazing young lady, her book, if you ever want to, so she's deaf, but her book is called Every Day I'm Just Deaf, or something like that. It's very close. There's just and definite. I think Every Day I'm Just Deaf. And she, at 4 years old, actually from vaccine or something, she just became deaf. Like, she went to the doctor later on that day, she lost her hearing. And she talks about going to public school, then going to deaf school, and then just all these things. She is a speaker. She's from Canada, I believe, but she speaks all over in different countries here in the United States. And she's just such an amazing young lady. And I think she's 22 or 23, and she's on her second or third book. And she's just such an inspiration. And she talks about how being a kid with a disability was, it's just very challenging. And there's just so many, like you said, judgment and everything. So if you ever want to look her up, or if anybody needs a speaker for that. If I knew her name off top, that would be fantastic. But I didn't know I was going to talk about her, and I love her. It's so funny. I was like, I know her face right here. Anyways, I'll get you that information if you need it. But so if anybody's interested in Johnny and Friends, guys, reach out. That's such an awesome organization. There's his website. Reach out and talk to him. It's so amazing, again, what you do. Thank you for your wife being a NICU nurse. I always wanted to do that, and I never got into it. So I just do, not just, but I was working in a trauma PACU for a while, and now I do discharge. I needed a little bit change of pace as well. So I do discharge from surgery, but any kind of nursing is also hard. But working with those little tiny babies, some of them a pound, some of them, that's takes a special person to do that. McKenna, you can only see your eyes, you silly girl.
I know.
Anyway.
But the thing is blocking the light.
The light is bothering you.
It's helping my head.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, thank you so much, John. You're awesome. We appreciate you for coming on. You got anything to say?
Thank you for coming.
Speak up.
Thank you for coming.
She's such a
Great
great
to be here. Thank you for having me.
So sorry. Thank you for sharing your story about your son. And I'm so excited that he likes it there, and you think and that he'll be done next year, and then he'll come back to Chicago. So that's so cool. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks, everybody. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John. I apologize.
I'll say we're very much looking forward to that for sure.
Yes, I can imagine. Aw. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.